Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome to this Thursday night program of Anamkara Meditation Foundation. I'm Lawrence Edwards, and it's just my heartfelt pleasure to be able to welcome you here with all my love to tonight's program. And we've been broadcasting from my home, so I'm welcoming you into my home as well, which is a deep pleasure for me. So this evening's program, now this is the second week in the month, and so we usually do some reading contemplations. And I had mentioned last week that we'll be doing some of the sacred poetry and some of the great ecstatic poet saints. So we'll be getting to that in a few minutes. We're going to be starting with the opening mantras. You can download the chanting sheet and the Heart Sutra and opening mantras all from the Anamkara Meditation Foundation website. And as you know, we start with the mantras because the power of mantra is the power of consciousness itself. In the yogic tradition, it's seen that all mantras, the sound form of the infinite, arise from this power of consciousness that technically in the yogic system is known as Kundalini Shakti. And this power of consciousness that both creates the body and the mind and our experience of everyday life, but also creates these very special forms of mantra as really to serve as a vehicle for bringing us back to the awareness of our infinitude. And it's very interesting because the Shakti, this power of consciousness, both creates the experience of being finite and limited and bound and identified with the mind, the body, the roles we play, and everything like that. But she also creates the means for getting free of that, because that power is resident in every one of us. It is all of what we experience. But this other aspect of it is what can awaken, metaphorically, and bring us to the consciousness of our fullness of being. And so it adds to everyday life and our ordinary experience, now the experience of the boundless presence of the divine, that's our essential nature. And the mantras, whether it's the mantras that we start with as an opening, that help to ease the mind out of the day and out of the week and out of all the things we've been engaged in, and come into this moment, become fully present here and now. Because it's in this moment, and now this moment, and now this moment. It's in the moment, in the presence, that we experience the fullness of the truth of who we are and the truth of what the nature is of all beings, of all of creation, the divine spread out before us. So mantras are a vehicle for being able to get to that awareness and then to carry it into the world, because then it transforms. How do we interact? How do we act? What are we seeking? All these things are transformed by true knowing. And that's the heart essence of the gift of the power of consciousness that comes through mantra. So we'll start with the opening mantras. Shrimata Kalim Devi Ki Jai Gajananam Bhuta Ganari Sevitam Kapita Jambu Palacharu Bhakshanam Umasutam Shokam Vinashakarakam Namami Vigneshwara Parapankajam Shri Ganeshaya Namaha Shri Ganeshaya Namaha Shri Ganeshaya Namaha Om Varnamada Varnamidam Varnat Varnamudachyate Varnasya Varnamandaya Varnamevavashishate Om Shrimati Kali Mahadevi Ki Jai. So good evening. Once again, I welcome you with all my heart and all my love to our program tonight. Such a honor and privilege to have you with us this evening. You know, this gathering is a gathering of people who have a really unique kind of interest and intent to practice and to look more deeply into themselves and into the heart of the divine so that we can live that into the world, especially at a time when it's so desperately needed. So to be in your company is a real blessing for me. And in part, that's really what, in a sense, tonight is about, company. In fact, one of my early teachers, Swami Muktananda, in a set of aphorisms called Mukteshwari, he wrote about company. He said, always keep away from bad company, otherwise the heaven created by your virtues will be consumed. The fire of wood burns the body of one birth. The fire of bad company burns you through many births. So keeping good company is something that's written about and talked about in many different traditions. In fact, one of the three jewels that Buddha talked about, Sangha, is the company of like-minded seekers, because we help uplift each other and help deepen our experience and insights together. So keeping company is really critical. So when we think about, okay, we're in isolation, we don't get to have as much company as we like, who do we keep company with? And what do we keep company with internally? Because that's really one of the critical parts is for somebody doing practices, it's really about our inner state. What's the company we keep in our minds? What's the company we keep in our heart? And being able to use our discrimination, our discernment, to be able to keep the highest company is really a critical part of being able to remain centered, settled in your highest nature, because the impact of company can change our experience. So in a sense, I wanted to invite a number of my friends who are my poet saint friends. And so I have a stack of different poet saints as people who have been with me on retreats. You know, I love to be able to dive into the poetry of many different traditions. Because, you know, the technical scriptures and texts on yoga and chakras and nadis and blah, 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 you know, I've never seen anybody come home to the divine through that kind of study. We come home to the divine and live in the presence of the divine through that loving experience, that heart-opening, mind-transcending experience. And in my experience, the poet saints and the poetry of many different traditions cuts through all that intellectual stuff to bring us directly into the heart. And it's in the heart that the light of the divine always is flaming. So we want to come home to that all the time. And different traditions have different flavors to it. So I'm going to share some from different traditions. It's like going to a party. You'll meet some people you really want to follow through and meet again. Others you might go, that was all right, but I don't think I want to bother with them. And that's okay. We're going to look at a few different kinds of traditions and poetry. And I'm going to start with really somebody who we unfortunately lost only recently and not thought of as a poet saint, but she has a very Zen-like approach to poetry. It's Mary Oliver, and so she's very well known. And her poetry can, again, cut through the mind, bring us into present-centered awareness so we can experience what's really there, what's really present, What's really here? This is a poem from her book, Felicity, and it's called Moments. There are moments that cry out to be fulfilled, like telling someone you love them or giving your money away, all of it. Your heart is beating, isn't it? You're not in chains, are you? There is nothing more pathetic than caution when headlong might save a life, even possibly your own. Headlong. That's the approach to practice. Headlong, passionate. Buddha would say, do your practices with the intensity of a person looking for water whose hair was on fire. My hair all burned off, so I'm good. But that intensity, so she highlights that. It's wonderful. Another poem that she writes is called The Gift. Be still, my soul, and steadfast. Earth and heaven are both still watching, though time is draining from the clock. And your walk, that was confident and quick, has become slow. So be slow if you must, but let the heart still play its true part. Love still as you once loved, deeply and without patience. Let God and the world know you are grateful that the gift has been given. So any time, any stage of life, that love, give expression to it as we can. Come back to the love. Well, in the Zen tradition, the great poet saint and Zen master Ryokan, he lived in the 18th, 19th century and was a Zen master in Japan. And his poetry, captures that Zen-like clarity. And he too, he doesn't have much time for pundits. He says, when I see learned priests lecturing on the sutras, their eloquence seems to flow in circles. The 5 periods of law, the 8 doctrines, nice theories, but who needs them? Pedants have swelled heads, but ask them matters of real importance, and all you get is empty babble. So even if you consume as many books as the sands of the Ganges, it is not as good as really catching one verse of Zen. See, if you want the secret of Buddhism, here it is. Everything is in the heart. Cutting right through. You know how many mountains of text there are on Buddhism? Here's the secret. It's all in the heart. Go there. Go there in stillness. Go in silence. Go in love. Ryokan writes, the great way leads nowhere, and it is no place. Affirm it, and you miss it by a mile. This is delusion, that is enlightenment. All that is also wide of the mark. You can expound theories of existence and non-existence, yet even talk of the middle way can get you sidetracked. I'll just keep my wonderful experiences to myself. Babble about enlightenment, and your words get torn to shreds. That state, beyond words, beyond description, beyond discussions, beyond arguments. Come home to that. And it's not that he's not aware of what happens in the world and has great compassion for that. In fact, he writes, this was a poem that he composed following a terrible earthquake. Day after day, at noon and midnight, the cold was piercing. The sky was thick with black clouds that blocked out the sun. Fierce winds howled, snow swirled violently. Wild waves stormed heaven, buffeting monster fish. Walls trembled and shook, people shrieked in terror. Looking back at the past 40 years, I see now that things were racing out of control. People had grown lax and indifferent, forming factions and fighting among themselves. They forgot about obligations, about duty, about dharma. They ignored notions of loyalty and justice and only thought of themselves. Full of self-conceit, they cheated each other, creating an endless, filthy mess. The world was rife with madness. No one shared my concern. Things got worse until finally disaster struck. Few were aware that the world was star-crossed and dreadfully out of kilter. If you really want to understand this tragedy, look deep inside, rather than helplessly bemoan your cruel fate. Leave off your mad rush for gold and jewels. I've got something far more precious for you, a bright pearl that sparkles more brilliantly than the sun and the moon. And it illuminates each and every eye. Lose it, and you'll wallow in a sea of pain. Find it, and you'll safely reach the other shore. I'd freely present this treasure to anyone, but hardly anyone asks for it. And then he writes this poem for children who were killed in a smallpox epidemic. When spring arrives, from every tree tip, flowers will bloom. But those children who fell with last autumn's leaves will never return. So the fullness of presence brings us to the fullness of being present with suffering as well. The fullness of compassion, the fullness of wisdom, the fullness of that Buddha mind, the four boundless treasures that go with that, the boundless love, the boundless compassion, the boundless equanimity, the boundless wisdom. And this is a poem from a very famous Tibetan Buddhist master, Milarepa. I've told his story about his discipleship to Marpa, and the very famous story of that is all about Marpa and Milarepa's being a disciple and what he had to work through until he became this extraordinary master back in like the 11th, 12th century. And he, again, like other masters, is writing a response to a logician. So somebody wants to argue logic, approached by reason. He starts off, he says, I bow at the feet of my teacher Marpa and sing this song in response to you. Listen, pay heed to what I say, forget your critique for a while. The best seeing is the way of non-seeing, the radiance of mind itself. The best prize is what cannot be looked for. It's the priceless treasure of awareness itself. The most nourishing food is non-eating, the transcendent food of samadhi. The most thirst-quenching drink is non-drinking, the nectar of heartfelt compassion. Oh, this self-realizing awareness is beyond words and descriptions. This mind is not of the world of children, nor is it of that of logicians. Attaining the truth of non-attainment, you receive the highest initiation. Perceiving the void of high and low, you reach the sublime stage. Approaching the truth of non-movement, You follow the supreme path, knowing the end of birth and death. The ultimate purpose is fulfilled. So seeing the emptiness of reason, supreme logic is perfected. When you know that great and small are groundless, non-existent, you have entered the highest gateway. Comprehending beyond good and evil opens the way to perfect skill. Experiencing the dissolution of duality, you embrace the highest view. Observing the truth of non-observation opens the way to meditating. Comprehending beyond ought and ought not opens the way to perfect action. When you realize the truth of non-effort, you are approaching the highest fruition. Ignorant are those who lack this truth. Arrogant teachers inflated by learning, scholars bewitched by mere words, and yogis seduced by prejudice. For though they yearn for freedom, they find only enslavement. So being entangled in concepts and studies and all this binds us, binds the mind, binds our experience. It's like feeding the mind that is convinced of its own self-importance. It loves ideas. It loves grand concepts. If we could just have the biggest concept available that could enwrap it all, it would be in bliss. And yet here's this attainment that's completely beyond the mind. We have to leave it all. Neti, neti, not this, not this, not this, not this. No eye, no ear, no nose, no mouth. The Heart Sutra, not this, not this, not this. It's not to be found in those studies. It's not to be found in these things. That's why non-observation opens meditation. The ordinary observer is the mind. Thinks, oh, I'm meditating. I'm meditating. Here I am. See? The one who thinks he's meditating never has. The one who has never thought always is. The self of all, is in that state continuously. We access it by leaving behind the mind to enter that pure state of spacious awareness. There's no doing that. That's pure being. Its very nature is awareness. The do awareness, it is boundless awareness. Boundless awareness suffused with boundless love. For the mind, these are separate things. Knowing and loving, not for consciousness. That which embraces everything in its consciousness is embracing it in love. Not as two separate things. The embrace, the consciousness is the love itself. It's creativity, giving birth to everything. It's that consciousness itself. That's what we want to come home to. That's actually even what the great sage Shankaracharya, when we talked about his Nirvana Shatkam, and how that was an expression of non-dual Vedanta, Advaita Vedanta. Well, he wrote another, and this is lengthy, I'm not going to go through all, but it's another chant, actually, and it's called Bhaja Govindam, worship the divine, worship God, worship Govinda. And it starts out really taking a few shots at the Sanskrit scholars and how they want to recite rules of grammar and correct, your pronunciation and all this. And so he's going, worship Govinda, worship Govinda, worship the divine, ignorant man. When the time to go is near, memorizing grammatical sutras will not protect you. Day and night, evening and morning, winter, spring, come again and again. Time rolls on. Life is spent, yet the wind of desire does not leave you. With a fire in front of him or the sun behind him, huddled with his chin on his knees at night, he begs for food with only his bare hands. He lives under trees, and yet the noose of desire does not leave him. So just renouncing and living a simple life, renouncing the pleasures and desires, is suppressing them. They're still there. He lives under the trees, yet the noose of desire does not leave him. As long as he is able to earn money, his relatives remain attached to him. Later, when he dodders with his decrepit body, not even the people in his own house ask for news of him. With matted locks, a shaven head, or plucked hair, clad in many ways, ochre-dyed clothes, turbans, such fools can see, but they do not really see. They don't see the truth. They are dressed in these different ways only for the sake of their stomachs. People posturing. If one has studied the Bhagavad Gita even a little, or drunk the tiniest drop from Gangama, or only once worshipped the divine, what can Lord Yama, the Lord of Death, say about him? Bhaja Govindam, Bhaja Govindam, Govindam, Bhaja Udamate. So he goes on, going at that way, just dispelling all the different ways that we can posture. You know, the mind likes to posture. That's why it wants to sort of hear and study and gets attached to a particular way, because then it can posture that way. See, look at me. I've got the clothes on. I've got the this and I've got the that. It postures. It's an imitator. In the yogic tradition, the ego mind is known as the power of self-appropriation. It appropriates to itself what it wants to possess. And it tries to do that with wisdom. It tries to do that with knowledge. It even tries to do that with compassion and love. But it always falls short. Always falls short. We have to rest in the fullness of being to have boundless compassion, boundless love, unconditional love. The mind can't posture at that. We come home to that in our own being. There's a great Sufi poet, ecstatic poet called Yunus Emre. And he writes, "We entered the house of realization. We possessed the body. The whirling skies, the many-layered earth, the 70,000 veils we found in the body. The night and the day, the planets, the words inscribed on the holy tablets, the hill that Moses climbed, the temple, and Israfil's trumpet, we observed in the body. Torah, Psalms, Gospel, Quran, what these books have to say, we found in the body. Everybody says these words of Yunus are true. Truth is wherever you want it. We found it all in the body." You're saying when we go inside, we find it all. It's not about going outside or going into a book or going on a pilgrimage. The greatest pilgrimage into the heart, into the light of the divine that illuminates everything. It's illuminating your experience right here, right now. It's illuminating by letting you hear these words, by seeing whatever you see, by sensing whatever you sense. That which illuminates that is the living presence of the divine. That self-luminous consciousness, the seer who's never seen, the hearer who's never heard, that's the ground of our being. That's what we are coming home to. That's what these great beings are pointing to. Come home to that, here, now. You don't have to run away. You don't have to hide. You'll find it right here, right now. So Yunus says, "I wasn't sober until I drank the wine of love. I didn't know myself until I met a master. Is your own knowledge enough to bring you where you have to go? You won't reach Allah. You'll be stuck unless you take a hand. If religion and faith are what you want, well, work hard and be righteous in this life. But unless you finish it today, you'll have the same task in the next world. A nightingale falls in love with the rose. The whole love affair begins with just one look from God. A true word ripens within. Oh, it's easy to speak when my heart was in submission. Is a lover ever valued for his words unless he also delivers the goods? See, to understand poor Eunice's words, you have to love very much. See, it's like the language of birds. What can you do but sing? Love. It's the key. Eunice writes, don't advise those who aren't in love. The unloving, like animals, can't understand. Don't distance yourself from the wise, but avoid the shallow. The ungiving disappoint God. They cannot see his face. Don't waste time on drab pigeons who consort with moles who avoid the deep-diving loon. Falcon and king each praise each other. See, even a weak falcon is still a falcon. So if you wash some dark stone for 50 years, you won't really transform it. The hidden sun, the prophet, changed appearance. Some say he died. He never does. Eunice, don't be stupid. Mix with the mature. A fool who talks of spiritual things is still a fool. So again, keeping company. Who do we keep company with? Keep company of the wise. Keep company of those with great hearts. Keep company of those of generous spirit. Keep company that uplifts. All those qualities are a reflection of the divine presence. That's what we want to keep company with. That's what we want to see moment by moment. I hope you're enjoying the company of my friends here. So this is a collection of poetry that is called Radical Love, and it's translated and edited by Omid Safi. Radical Love. It's a great collection. In case you ever want to get that, I've written about it in past e-newsletters as well. This is Hazrat Inayat Khan. I searched and searched. I could not find thee anywhere. I called thee aloud. Standing on the minaret, I rang the temple bell with the rising and the setting of the sun. I bathed in the Ganges in vain. I came back from the Kaaba disappointed. I looked for thee in heaven, my beloved, my pearl. But at last I found thee, hidden in the shell of my heart. So across traditions, over and over, this is what we hear from the great masters. Go within, go into the heart. Kabir, the great poet Saint Kabir wrote, you can break a temple, you can break a mosque, but never break the human heart, for that's where God really dwells. This is the poet Saint Karakani. Don't be meek in this love. Well, be kind to people, receive wisdom from the prophets, but don't be meek in this love. For God is bold and likes those who are bold in adoration. This path is for the bold, the intoxicated, the love-crazed. With God, being love-crazed, intoxicated, and bold works. So we let go. We're so restrained. So many places we need to practice restraint. That's what the yamas and the niyamas are. But in relation to the divine, our own highest self, no, be passionate. But also Kabir, another line from Kabir comes back to me. Kabir wrote, that longing is what does all the work. That longing for the one, that longing for God. And he said, see that? I am a slave of that longing. And along those lines, Rumi writes, every hope and desire, affection, love, tenderness, every hope and desire that humanity has for father and mother, for brother and friend, for heaven and earth, for gardens and pavilions, for knowledge and action, for food and drink. These are all hopes and desires for God. All hopes and desires for God. Pierces the veil. Our longing for the fullness, our longing for completeness, our longing for that embrace finds the everlasting satisfaction in the divine embrace. Coming home to the divine, coming home to ourself. That's where all the rivers of desire can lead us when we have the right understanding. The great poet Saint Rabia, she writes, well, Rabia was staggering around one morning like one who's drunk, and she was asked, what makes you stagger? She said, I got intoxicated from the love of God last night. His love is making me tipsy. To be intoxicated with that love. That arises from within. That arises from our own being, our own divine presence. That can't be injected, that can't be swallowed, that can't be eaten. That arises because that's where it is. Always has been. It arises in the fullness of your being, moment by moment. Shift our attention away from all the things the mind is addicted to attending to. Teach it to attend to that space of the heart, that space of love, that divine presence. Poet Saint Attar writes, when you enter God's presence, your heart awakens. When you taste love, you'll find the key to all the worlds. The poet Saint Sadi writes, my gracious and flirtatious beloved, don't ask me if I ever think of you. How can I remember you when there's no forgetting you? Who can forget the beloved? Once you've been in that company, everything else pales. Coming home to that over and over. So all the practices, all the things that we do, mantra is the love song of the divine. Mantra is the divine reaching out from love to provide this royal vehicle for coming home to our own being, our own self, the divine. And this is a poem from a dear friend of mine, actually. Her name is Dorothy Walters. This is a new book she has out called Kundalini Wonder. It just came out. I actually wrote a piece for it, so you might find that in there. But she's a wonderful poet. She has many volumes of poetry out, especially around spirituality and Kundalini. And she's a grand old wise woman. She's, I think, 93 now. Just produced this book. I don't know, it might be her 10th or more. Great soul, great heart, and her poetry ranges, from communing with the infinite and the divine to those sort of in the moment, piercing insights and perceptions. So you'll delight in her work. And this is her poem called The Anatomy of the Inner World. This is a place you enter without key or combination. It is where your spirit lives when you are out doing errands or at the theater with friends. It is always waiting like a constant lover, a devoted friend. It keeps changing how it looks, becomes a shapeshifter, a floating image in the trees. But when you find it again, its face is always familiar, like the one you looked at so carefully after you were born. Sometimes it is a rose garden, sometimes a temple, sometimes the rose itself unfolding. Coming home to that. That's why we keep the company of writers and beings and sages like that. They help remind us of this deep truth that we know. This is all about remembering what already is. Not about creating something that wasn't. This is remembering the truth of who you are. This is remembering the boundless nature of your heart. This is remembering the fullness of compassion that is your sublime nature. This is a poem from Kali's Bazaar. What fun! Oh, my beloved, what fun pretending there's a we when we both know there isn't even a me. This me is an illusion. Your me is an illusion. There's just one. There's only one. Only one. She wears 1,000 faces. She's only one. She's your face. She's the face of your spouse, your children, your friends, your enemies. All the faces of the one. Know that. Know that. See through that love. So you see the truth of who they are. I went to the Master simply to be free. She opened my heart, tore off the veil, leaving no bonds holding anything to this phantom me. Now this puppet dances on. Who holds the strings? Mother of time, devourer of now. She delights in playing the I she wanted me to be. Only one. Only one. The flute has but one job, to remain open. And even that is accomplished by its creator. You are that flute. Your life is the breath of God playing through that flute. You're like the flute in Krishna's hands, warmed by his breath, playing the song of your love, your presence into this world. Just remain open. The breath of God will flow through. Remain open. It's our only job. And even that is accomplished by our Creator. She has thrown open the doors of the heart and the mind and the soul. Just delight in her flowing through. Mantra is one of the forms that flows through in that way and takes us home to that true knowing, the fullness of knowing who and what we are, moment by moment. So we'll chant the mantra Om Namah Shivaya now for a few minutes. Om Namah Shivaya. I bow to the auspicious one. That's a message for the mind. That's a message for the mind. Bow to the auspicious one. The divine presence. The divine presence that fills your entire being, that is every cell and atom of your body. Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya. Anything you see is Shiva, the auspicious one. Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya. Anything you hear is Shiva. Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya. Anything you feel, anything you sense, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya. In meditation, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya. It is all Shiva, nothing left out. It is all the divine, all the auspicious one. That's all there is. That's the heart essence of mantra, is to come home to that awareness. I am that. I am that. Then you can come to rest in that, knowing that, living that into the world with all the love and compassion, the boundless love, the boundless compassion, the boundless wisdom, the boundless strength that is the very nature of who and what you truly are. So chant the mantra for a few minutes and then just sit in that stillness. Rest in that. If the mind moves, let it move with a silent repetition of Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya. It is all the auspicious one. Shrimata Kali Devi Ki Jai. Shiva. So we end with this prayer. And may all our practices truly benefit everyone. And may all beings know complete freedom from suffering. Namaste. So coming back to the living presence of the divine, the truth of who you are, the truth of who everyone is. So all our practices are aimed at in keeping company of the wise, keeping company, whether it's through poets, saints, or other ways, to keep our consciousness of the ordinary mind engaged in that, feeling the presence of that, feeling supported by that, so that we can live from that heart space, that true knowing, and live it into the world. Live our love, our compassion, our patience, our kindness, to help transform the world, even while we're transforming the qualities of our own mind. So keep coming back to that. Find the sangha, the company that is most uplifting to you, that keeps you in touch with that. Even when our work takes us into other realms, we can hold that awareness inside. That's why, again, the practice of mantra, and there's a practice called japa, where we just keep repeating the mantra silently in the mind over and over throughout the day, so that wherever we are, whatever we're doing, whatever our life calls us to have to encounter, inwardly, that inner space, that inner sky of awareness can be illuminated with that living presence. Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya. Keep coming back to that. Take refuge in that. So we're coming to a close now, and I want to thank you all for bringing your sublime presence, your dedication to practice, and living that into the world. So good to have your company and to share this time together and to support each other and bring this into the world with all the fullness of our heart and being and mind, so that we can support others and help being a living presence of the divine. Uh, in our own humble ways, in our own humble lives, we bring that presence in. So thank you so much for all the ways that you do that and all the ways that you support Anamkara through sharing our e-newsletters, letting people know about the YouTube channel, subscribing to that. If you subscribe to that, it also helps us. Um, Also, you can see in the e-newsletter, we now also have the Twitter account going. So we'll be tweeting information and updates on programs, and also just sometimes that things that are inspiring and uplifting that can continue to support us. So it seems like it's a mechanism for being able to sort of put out little tweets, little bursts here and there. Remember who you are. Remember who that other being is. Come home to yourself. Bring that love into the moment. And so again, with all my heart and all my gratitude, all my love, thank you for coming tonight. And I look forward to being with you next Thursday.